Value and unique attributes of Nibbana. Nibbana is attainable in this lifetime. Nibbana, the highest goal of Buddhism, can be realized by people in this present life when they apply effort and are endowed with the necessary spiritual qualities. One need not wait until the next life, as revealed by the dual attributes of Nibbana, Sanditiko, seen clearly by oneself, realizable in this life, and Akadiko, not subject to time, timeless, immediate. The Buddha offered ways of practice for realizing Nibbana in this present life, as confirmed in this passage. I tell you this, let a wise person come to me who is sincere, honest, and straightforward, and I will instruct him. I will teach him Dhamma. If he practices what he is taught, then within 7 years, by realizing for himself here and now, through direct knowledge, he will enter upon and abide in that supreme goal of the holy life, for the sake of which clansmen rightly go forth from the home life into homelessness. Let alone 7 years, in 6 years, 5 years, in a fortnight, in 7 days he can achieve that goal. Nibbana is attainable by all. Every person with determination and spiritual aptitude can realize Nibbana. No restrictions exist concerning race, class, caste, wealth, gender, or whether one is a householder or monastic, as verified by the Buddha's verses. The straight way, that path is called, and fearless is its destination. The chariot is called silent, fitted with wheels of righteousness. A sense of shame is its rear guard, mindfulness its armor. I say this Dhamma vehicle has right view guiding as a charioteer. One who has such a vehicle, whether a woman or a man, has by means of this vehicle arrived at the abode of Nibbana. The Buddha permitted women to be ordained as bhikkhuni, despite the opposition by elements of Indian society at that time. He claimed that women who follow the Dhamma Vinaya are capable of realizing supramundane states, from stream entry to arahantship, equally as men. At one time, Soma Bhikkhuni was sitting at the foot of a tree when Mara approached, and wanting to disturb and frighten her, exclaimed in verse, which is to be attained by the seers cannot be attained by a woman with her two-fingered wisdom. Soma Theri replied, what does womanhood matter at all? When the mind is concentrated well, when knowledge flows on steadily, seeing correctly into Dhamma, one to whom it might occur, I am a woman, or I am a man, or I am anything at all, is fit for Mara to address. In relation to householders and monastics, the Buddha had this to say. I do not praise the wrong way of practice on the part of either of a householder or one gone forth. For whether it be a householder or one gone forth, one who has entered on the wrong way of practice by reason of his wrong way of practice is not accomplishing the true way, the Dhamma that is wholesome. I praise the right way of practice on the part either of a householder or one gone forth. For whether it be a householder or one gone forth, one who has entered on the right way of practice by reason of his right way of practice is accomplishing the true way, the Dhamma that is wholesome. I say there is no difference between a lay follower who is thus liberated in mind and a bhikkhu who has been liberated in mind for 100 years. That is the one liberation that is same as the other. The Buddha frequently discussed the issue of caste, which was an important point of debate and controversy in India at that time. One example is the discussion between the Buddha and the Brahmin Esukari. Master Gautama, the Brahmins prescribe 4 types of wealth. They prescribe wandering for alms as the wealth of a Brahmin, the bow and the quiver as the wealth of a noble, farming and cattle breeding as the wealth of a merchant, the sickle and carrying pole as the wealth of a worker. What does Master Gautama say about this? Well, Brahman, has all the world authorized the Brahmins to prescribe these 4 types of wealth? No, Master Gautama. Suppose Brahman they were to force a cut of meat upon a poor, penniless, destitute man and tell him, "Good man, you must eat this meat and pay for it." So too, without the consent of those other recluses and Brahmins, the Brahmins nevertheless prescribe these 4 types of wealth. I, Brahman, declare the noble supramundane Dhamma as a person's own wealth. What do you think, Brahman? Suppose I had anointed noble king were to assume here 100 men of different birth, and say to them, "Come, sirs, let any here who have been born into a noble clan, or a Brahmin clan, or a royal clan, take a fire stick of teak, salwood, pine, sandalwood, or pomegranate wood, and light a fire, and produce heat. And also let any who have been born into an outcast clan, a trapper clan, a wicker workers clan, a cartwright's clan, or a scavenger's clan, take a fire stick made from a dog's drinking trough, from a pig's trough, from a dyeing vat, or from castor oil wood, and light a fire and produce heat. What do you think, Brahman? When a fire is lit and heat is produced by someone in the first group, would that fire have a flame, a colour, and a radiance, and would it be possible to use it for the purposes of fire? While when a fire is lit and heat is produced by someone of the second group, that fire would have no flame, no colour, and no radiance, and it would not be possible to use for the purposes of fire. And would it not be possible for the use of fire? No, Master Gautama, for all fire has a flame, a colour, and a radiance, and it is possible to use all fire for the purposes of fire. So too, Brahman, if anyone from a clan of nobles goes forth from the home life into homelessness, and relying on the Dhamma and discipline proclaimed by the Tathagata, holds right view, he is one who fulfills the wholesome qualities that are the way of deliverance. If anyone from a clan of Brahmins goes forth, from a clan of merchants, from a clan of workers goes forth from the home life into homelessness, and relying on the Dhamma and discipline proclaimed by the Tathagata, holds right view, he is one who fulfills the wholesome qualities that are the way of deliverance. Nibbana is the highest spiritual attainment. Although the attainment of Nibbana is dependent on mental deliverance, Ceto Vimutti, that is, it relies on a particular achievement of jhana, and this achievement has bearing on the everyday life of enlightened beings. Nibbana is distinct from jhana. Nibbana is a release even from these psychic achievements, and is accessible when one is able to transcend them. There are some unique aspects to the attainment of Nibbana. The realization of Nibbana is decisive, final, and irreversible. In regard to moral conduct, for example, true, spontaneous selflessness arises. This selfless conduct stems from eradication by wisdom of selfish hankering, to the point that all self-obsession is abolished. As this selflessness arises naturally and of its own accord, it is not the result of willpower or force. One need not seize one opinion or habit in order to let go of another. One need not hold up some ideal, sacrifice oneself to an object of faith, suppress one's passions by calm or insight, or get absorbed in jhana. No matter how lofty a person's mental achievements, one must see into their causal nature and let go of attachment to these achievements before realization of Nibbana is possible. This letting go ultimately supports, consolidates, and perfects further spiritual development, even for enlightened beings. For example, such beings can benefit from proficiency in jhana in order to abide in a state of ease and happiness, Ditadhamma Sukha Vihara, when they are not engaged in other activities. If originally they accessed the 8 levels of jhana with the realization as a non-returner or an arahant, they may achieve cessation of perception and feeling, Sanya Veda Ita Nirodha. Some spiritual accomplishments can suspend defilements and suffering for a long period, but not yet irrevocably. The defilements and suffering can return, and therefore these heightened mental states are temporary. They are a means to suppress other conditions or to engage the mind in something else. The realization of Nibbana, however, puts an absolute end to suffering and mental impurities. And through this realization, only harmful conditions cease, for example, greed, craving, anger, woe, confusion, fixed views of self, and ignorance. All goodness remains. Furthermore, the vices are automatically replaced by the exceptional wholesome qualities of a life guided by wisdom and compassion, which surpasses ordinary happiness and cannot be securely accessed by other spiritual achievements. Therefore, although a person who has realized Nibbana may not have experienced the most refined states of jhana, he or she is still superior to someone who has these experiences, but is as yet not fully enlightened. The realization of Nibbana brings about a fundamental transformation of a person's heart, personality, thinking process, worldview, and behavior. There are 2 principal aspects to this mental transformation. The first involves knowledge, understanding, opinions, and beliefs, which pertain to ignorance and wisdom. The second involves a person's sense of values, a relationship to desire, which pertains to craving and wholesome enthusiasm, chanda. A student who believes her teacher will criticize and punish her may tremble at the thought of meeting the teacher, whereas if she knows that the teacher is kind, she will feel happy and at ease. People who see others as enemies and those who see others as friends will behave differently. A person finding a map that shows the location of a hidden diamond may risk his life and even kill others for for that diamond, while another person may not give it much thought. People desiring pleasurable sights, tastes, fragrances, sounds, and tangible objects tend to be engrossed with these things. If they believe that they can truly possess these objects, then their happiness is dependent on the acquisition of these things. In contrast, fully enlightened beings understand the world as it really is. They see nothing that can be truly owned or controlled. They go beyond the search for pleasurable sensations, and they recognize how to act in harmony with truth. They do not yearn for sense impressions. As a consequence, a new understanding arises of one's relationship to the world, including material possessions, other people, nature, and even one's own life. One is of the world, but not bound to or tarnished by it. This liberation and inner transformation is difficult to describe, and therefore the scriptures explain it with similes. For example, recovering from an illness, sobering up, cooling down, clearing out refuse, escaping from a snare or chain, and crossing over an expanse of water to a safe haven. Many of these similes depict the happiness of relieving an original entanglement, inconvenience, confinement, and struggle. To release these constraints to a state of freedom and safety is Nibbana. Enlightened persons can move about as they please, without worrying about self-protection. Some of the above similes can be used for other spiritual achievements. The difference lies in the fact that jhana, for instance, provides only temporary results. In every time period, at least a small percentage of human beings will seek the meaning and ultimate goal of life, beyond merely being born, searching for sense pleasure and dying. Sometimes material difficulties or a struggle for survival will cause them to temporarily neglect or interrupt their search. But when circumstances permit, and as long as doubts persists, people will concern themselves with these matters. Therefore, any creed or philosophy that merely answers to material comfort and does not meet people's spiritual needs is incomplete and unable to offer adequate satisfaction. To use Buddhist terminology, responding to mundane welfare, ditta dhammi kata, alone is insufficient. One must also attend to spiritual welfare, samparayikata, and supreme welfare, paramatta. The teachings on Nibbana and other spiritual achievements fulfill this requirement. Some psychic attainments, however, although surpassing mundane phenomena, are still classified as subordinate. That is, one is encouraged to reach the final stage of Nibbana, the supreme benefit and true perfection.